Welcome back, everybody, to another in the World War series. And this time we have Bill with me to tell me if I'm insane or not. And if you've been following along the videos, what I'm trying to do is I was sorting books out at my house the other day, and I realized number one, I have a lot of books, and it really hurts when I try to organize them all in a 2 day time span because you have to move all those things. Um, and then my legs and my back go, no. And second, I've probably read 60 or 70 books in between World War One and World War Two over time. And I was like, wow, I actually kind of know a lot about this stuff. So I was going back through a couple of them and I said, you know what? I'm going to start pulling at least snippets out and see if we could connect at least World War One, which I firmly believe was the opening act of World War Two, because the way World War One ended, it kind of led to World War Two. Without the armistice, World War Two, maybe not. But if you look at the reasons and the stuff behind World War One, and you look at the conflicts around the world today, you can almost draw a straight line, and that's kind of disturbing. Uh, Bill, do you want to add anything before I dive into the one thing that I wanted to talk about today?
Well, I don't want to step on your toes on anything, but one thing I can recommend to viewers, if you've never read it, now I know Tim and I are going to be focusing primarily on World War One, but if you want to understand the bridge between World War One and World War Two, one of the best places you can start is a book by a journalist of the time named William Schreier, and that book is called Rise and Fall of the Third Reich.
Great book.
Um, it is a massive tome. It is not easy reading, but his style and his reportage will pull you straight in if you really want to dig into some nuts and bolts about how an Austrian corporal who was part of the messenger corps of the Imperial German Army wound up kicking off the most devastating conflict in human history. You got to read that book. I mean, even if some of the assumptions of it have been modified or superseded, there are some concrete bedrock facts in Schreier's book that are immutable, and they bridge right back to what Tim and I are going to be talking about today.
So the book I'm using to do these videos more than anything else is a six-part series that actually was my grandfather's and then became my father's and is now mine. It's called the Complete Edition History of the World War. It's this six-part series right here.
Mm-hmm.
It's called History of the World War because it was published in 1918. So it was before World War II, and it was written by a guy named Francis A. March, son of General March, who was involved in the war from the American side. And they point a lot of interesting things out. And they say we wanted to get this book done fast because it's still fresh in everybody's mind, and if we don't, everybody's going to forget. And so it's one of the most devastatingly boring things you ever want to read, but has all the facts and figures and lines stuff out in ways that I had never seen any other book do. And one of the things I did in another video was I went through the numbers, and the global population at the time was like 1.8 billion people. If you looked at the 28 nations involved in the war, they represented 1.5 billion people. So I think that pretty much qualifies as world war.
Definitely.
And if you look at the number of people mobilized, it was 60 million, which works out to like 3% of the planet was mobilized to fight this. This was World War One, not World War Two. I haven't even gotten to World War Two numbers, right? So it's just World War One, and it cost something like $250 billion, which at the time was not the same as today. If you convert that to today's dollars, it's 5.3 trillion. So it was not cheap. But I had a little set of notes I want to talk to you about, and I want to get through these notes, and then we'll talk about them. Now, World War One really kind of started in the Balkans, and everybody says, "Oh, it's because of the Archduke." And if you haven't ever seen the image, and based on public education, some people may not have, Archduke Ferdinand. This was a picture of him right before he was assassinated, and it's this guy right here. That's his wife. He was in a parade, and somebody jumped out and shot and killed him. The Balkan countries at the time had been really under the grips of European powers, and they kind of been that way for a couple of generations. Russia had some, France, Italy, they all kind of split them up. So Germany had some. Bulgaria, Greece, and Balkan Turkey, it was kind of all debatable who was in charge, and they sort of changed hands every couple of years, and there was this international argument over who they belonged to, and the people there were like, "Hey, how about us belonging to us, right, instead of belonging to somebody else?" And when World War One was declared, the Balkan nations were still living under this thing called the Treaty of Bucharest from 1913. It was supposed to bring peace to the region. It didn't really work. And when the assassination occurred, it kind of sent this convulsive shudder throughout the Balkans, but it was really because of that century long disagreement. Like Serbia, Montenegro, Russia never really forgave Austria for seizing Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia sound familiar? Like we haven't fought over that one recently.
Right.
And forcing them to live under the Austrian crown, which was, not remotely close to them. It was off someplace else. And after that, a bunch of nations started to pick sides and they all went to war. It wasn't necessarily because of the assassination. That was the catalyst, but really it was over a discussion about, or an argument, a century long argument over should small countries be able to govern themselves instead of having to pay attention to some far off dictator, king, queen, whatever, thousands of miles away, hundreds of miles away. But at the time, remember, airplanes aren't a thing yet. Choo choo trains are how you get around.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got this far off king, queen, royal, whatever, telling you what to do. They don't know your problems. They don't know what goes on in your local area too much. They're just telling you how things are going to run, right? And you're supposed to pay attention. And if you fast forward that to today, the right to self govern, you see that around the world. And more importantly, I think you're starting to see a lot more of it here in the United States because we're depending more and more on a very small number of people inside DC to make every decision for everybody everywhere. And it's causing a lot of angst. It's causing a lot of people to be really kind of annoyed at those people in DC. Maybe your congressman comes back to the district off and on and talks to people. Maybe they don't. I dare you to get a hold of a senator, right? I mean, that's like never going to happen unless you're a high end donor. So maybe you can get a congressman who's one of 500 or so, and maybe they care about you, maybe they don't, but only if you're a donor. I guarantee you get better attention then. So I see this sort of right to self govern and right to choose for the locality um, is what caused that war and what caused World War II, which also, by the way, caused the Cold War, which also, by the way, caused everything that's going on in the Middle East, which is really a couple centuries old because let's face it, we've been fighting over Jerusalem since the Crusades. It's not going to change. Whoever owns it is just a target. It's just the way it's going to be. But if you look at it, all the arguments we see around the world for like versus even Ukraine, it goes back to World War One. It's the right for little groups to self-govern instead of big groups far away doing it. And it seems like we're going back into this world where imperialism is sort of like, hey, let's give that a try again. We haven't done it recently, right? Maybe we can get it right this time. I don't know, Bill. Am I crazy or am I looking at this kind of like?
No, I don't. The, I feel like social media, whether you think it's just this kind of um, self-induced neuroses or whether you think it's outside actors, tends to hype up the idea that we've reached some insane breaking point, that things are like onion skin thin and pulled to the breaking point right now. um I think there is a sense of, you know, for God's sake, just let me worry about what's going on in my back 40 in Idaho, and you
Yeah.
worry about what's going on in Washington D.C., or let me concern myself with my with my cabbage farm in rural Denmark, and you guys concern yourself with what's in the city, is just wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Um, I don't know that things are that much of a literal, and I'm not using literal in the modern definition. I mean an actual uh
Truly
right,
literal, not literal
truly
but
literal
figurative.
crisis stage. This is a little remembered period in history, but Tim and I, being Gen Xers, know full well about the days of rage in the early 1970s. You had one domestic terrorist bombing a day for months
Yeah.
and months and months and months in the United States, not not in Mexico, not in the Middle East, not in Africa, in these United States. So us being mad at each other on Twitter, and even getting in pushing and shoving in protests in Seattle or in DC or Atlanta or wherever you are, is, trust me, it's not as bad as it could get. The situation in in this section of the world. Tim, I actually have a map of Europe just prior to World War One. If you'd like me to share
You
that,
should be able to share it.
yeah,
Yeah.
let me share that. Not the screen. Let's just do the window and see if that'll share. Did that share?
Yep.
Okay. Um, do you have a number of nations here? And for our viewers' sake, I want you to take a look at this. Pull up a map of Austria, wherever you are right now. Look at Austria. It's right about here.
Little teeny country. Yeah.
Little teeny country. Austria-Hungary was referred to as an empire.
Yeah.
The Austro-Hungarian Empire, and rightly so, and the German Empire. You know what's missing? Poland. There's no
Yeah.
Poland over here. Um,
The
and
Russian Empire,
uh,
even
uh,
the Ottomans had an empire of sorts. It was
yes, yes. I mean, the entire Mid East, the situation in the Mid East today can be drawn back to the First World War. But I just wanted to give watchers some perspective on what the geopolitical situation was like in Europe prior to the First World War. Um, and all of these countries are
there's
full of people who ethnically, socially, religiously are very disparate and don't like each other much at all.
there's
And a
probably
lot of that persists
10
today.
or 12 countries inside there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I guess to answer your question, Tim, um, I don't think we're to this degree of division here in the United States yet. I hope we never get there.
I hope so too.
But but that's just to kind of give people a perspective. I think maybe there's a modern idea that uh that at the time of World War One, things like, if you look at a map of Europe today, it's like, okay, it was like that, but World War One happened. Germany and
Yeah.
every. No, trust me, we're talking about much different ethnic and geographic lines being drawn here. Um, so
Yeah, not
uh,
much of it. I mean, Spain kind of is the same today. Portugal's kind of the same.
yeah,
France is sort of the same, but everything else is Norway and all that. But
yeah.
everything else is pretty much different.
Italy's borders have shifted. And you've got Denmark, I think, extends all the way down
Yep.
into what is today borders modern Germany, but back then they basically took a big bite out of the German Empire. This entire region is Poland, and then Belarus, and of course up here you've got Latvia and Lithuania and so on.
All of whom are very, very different people. But
Yes.
the thing I think though that World War One teaches us that is a slippery slope, is it was really fought over this imperialism thing where you see all these empires where everybody wanted to
Mhm.
have an empire and be the imperial king on the hill of whatever with the big hat that everybody genuflected to.
Mhm.
And you're seeing, I think, a little bit more imperialistic like behavior, especially out of Putin And we've at least talked about it, but not taken any action. Thank goodness. Because I think, like us trying to annex part of Canada would be stupid, or Greenland, or whatever the hell it was we were trying to do for a while. But
Right.
um, I think small countries need to be, and maybe me jumping to the conclusion that, hey, the United States is divided. Yeah, we've been very divided before. If you look at the history of the 60s and the 70s, it was crazy. Um, are we divided today? Sure. I mean, are we different politically as you move around the country? Well, when I lived in Massachusetts, I was called a right wing nut job, and in Texas, I'm a left wing lunatic. So I, take that for what it may. I haven't changed my stance. I'm just, that's what they call me in the different states. Not sure what they would call me in California other than, hey, dude. Um, do you know how to surf? Um,
It'd
I'm
be much the same
generalizing
here in
this.
Florida.
Yeah, except watch out for that gator.
Yeah, watch out
Uh,
for the gators.
I did establish the other day that if there's a puddle of water, there's an alligator in it. I think it
Yes, that
was,
is true. Anyone watching, natural bodies of water in Florida are inhabited by alligators. Period.
and it
I
doesn't have
don't
to
say
be a
that as
big
a
one.
I don't say that as a lead into a Florida man joke. That's just how things are here.
And if you own a pool, you will have an alligator in it sooner or later.
If you don't have an enclosure, yes, you will.
So, um, I think, yeah. Are we divided? Are we ready to go declare a civil war in the United States? No, we're nowhere remotely close to that. But are we on a slope that says, hey, look, the precursors for where World War I started are kind of starting to poke their head up a little bit? I wish everybody would just calm down about politics and get along, right? But we don't seem to be able to do that. So my point was that I think the World War I attitude of, hey, look, let's tell everybody else what they need to do from far away, when I don't really pay attention to their wants, needs, or desires. I think I see that starting to poke up more than I have in the last 10 or 15 years. Um, Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just paying more attention than I used to. But that was really why World War I was fought. And every time I bring up World War I anywhere, whether it's Twitter and out different places, like, oh, it was all fought because of the Archduke. I'm like, yeah, that was the spark. That wasn't like, we assassinated one guy, so hey, let's go kill, however many millions of people it was. That's not the way it worked. It was really fought over the right of people to govern themselves, rather than having to pay attention to someone else. Because like the total casualty count in World War I, and I'm looking it up right now, was 33 million people. If you were in
Mhm.
the war, you had a better than 50% chance of being a casualty, either killed or wounded. I mean, that's a lot, right? I mean, that's sort of a measurable percentage of the global population at the time.
Mhm.
And that's the other reason I'm kind of doing this, is I see people a lot of times, especially on social media, say, "Oh, it's the next World War. We're going to be in a World War." I'm like, "Do you understand what a World War is?" This little localized conflicts,
Yeah.
even the War on Terror, is not remotely close to the scale of what you saw in World War I or World War II. If you took 100 people before the war, three of them would have been mobilized on average, for World War I. And one of them probably didn't come home, or one and a half of them probably didn't come home.
Yeah. One of
So
uh your viewers might be able to infer this looking at my kind of ridiculous surroundings here, but one of my favorite, if not my favorite author is of course the great J.R.R. Tolkien. Tolkien fought in the Great War.
yes.
Pneumonia took him out of the line. Pneumonia and trench foot took him out of the line, and it must have been pretty severe. The British were not given to pulling guys out of the line just because, like, oh, yeah, oh, you got a bit of a head cold there, Private Tolkien. Well, some popping some jerry's will fix you right up. So they pulled him out of the line just prior to the Battle of the Somme.
That was a nasty one.
J.R.R. Tolkien's friend group, his friend circle, were no longer alive when he returned to the line. Men he
Wow.
had gone to secondary school with, men he had gone to college with, they were gone. I mean, we online aside, I think we tend to keep a pretty tight circle of acquaintances and everything. But I mean, I don't know what I'd say or do if tomorrow, I switched on the camera and said all the people who've done collabs on the show are simply not with us anymore. They were all killed. That is the scale of casualty we're talking about happened in the First World War.
I mean, yeah, and the other thing that I find interesting about it is it was such large scale that you know ludicrously famous people were involved in either coming up with solutions for problems or trying to help solve different issues. Like Marie Curie was actually, by the way, Marie Curie is one of for anybody who doesn't know, I have a PhD in physics and I look at famous scientists because why not? It's a thing to do. Marie Curie was the first person, not woman, person to ever win two Nobel Prizes. She had one in physics and one in chemistry. And during World War One, she actually pioneered the help to get mobile X-ray units into the field. So this was not a hey, look, it's that thing that goes on. We sort of look at on the news. This was an all hands on deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody out there is doing this. And that's the other thing I like to try to do with these videos is tell people, hey, look, this was not like some people volunteered from your high school and went off and you get emails from them and the war on terror. I got to give it to all the guys who served. I got out of the military in 1996. I was pre-war on terror. The guys who served there, I'm not taking anything away from anybody. It was a horrific thing, especially having to fight in urban areas in between apartment buildings or on civilians. I mean, it's a terrible thing to have to do. So modern warfare, I'm not taking anything away from anybody who fought it. I'm just saying the size and scale of it are different compared to what you saw in World War II, especially World War One. You had the president coming out going, "Hey, farmers, I know you make more money at growing one thing, but I need you to grow food because we need to send tons of food over there to Europe because their
Yeah.
farmers can't do anything right now." Right.
Yeah.
So you had this sort of national thing where it was like everybody's going to have to contribute something because just because 3% of the population was enlist was under arms or in uniform. Remember, that's globally. That doesn't mean other people weren't contributing to the war effort, right? So you had farmers, you had industrial capabilities. I don't know how many ships we cranked out, but to send the 1.5 million or 2 million soldiers we sent over there to fight, it wasn't like we could just load up a bunch of 737s because those didn't exist, right? You had biplanes at best. We had to crank
Right.
out over 100 vessels, I think it was, in like a year and a half to cram people in like sardines to get them over there to help with the work. Because if the Americans had not shown up, Germany wins, right? There's
Very, very, very likely. I have read things that to the effect that Ludendorff knew in 1917 when the United States got involved that they had to do something to break the back of the French and the British immediately because he knew that we were effectively a bottomless well of fresh troops that Germany could not like they just could not match the manpower that the United States was going to be able to throw into the war in the last bit. And that's another thing, another critical thing. And I was guilty of this when I was a child, of not understanding this. The United States participation in the First World War, as big as it was actually time wise fairly limited. We were
it.
not in it for 4 years.
We were not. And the other thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is when we showed up, we didn't have a standing military really before this thing started. We had sort of an army, but we didn't have one to this scale.
Mm-hmm.
And when they started pulling in guys who worked in shops and farms and wherever, nobody was really trained in how to fight. And you don't go fight in a trench warfare without having some measure of training. So when we showed up, the British, France, and everybody else were like, "Oh yeah, God, the Americans are here. They don't know what they're doing. They're not ready for this." And after the first battle, even the British were like, "Hey, these guys actually can fight." Holy crap!
See, you had I mean you look at guys like Alvin York, Alvin York, um, he captured 150 plus Germans by himself, like
Yeah.
literally by himself, with by dint of his sharpshooting capability. I mean, you know, we when we started drafting people, we were dragging in a whole lot of people whose not as a matter of recreation, not as a matter of sport, as a matter of survival, were riflemen. It's like if my family's going to eat this week, I need to go out and shoot something, and I need to waste as few bullets as possible, because a box of 22 long is 10 cents, and that's 10 cents I don't have right now. So,
Yeah, I mean, we could shoot. That's one thing Americans always know how to do is shoot, right? I mean,
yeah.
ask the British, right? Um, sorry, Brit. Sorry, anybody in the UK. I had to throw that plug in there. If you're gonna walk in a straight line with red coats on and expect Americans to miss you, I'm sorry, especially in Kentucky, so, where we had the riflemen, because the muskets are different, and we had a few riflemen, and it just didn't go your way. But anyway, I think the point is that my point with these videos is that this war was big in ways that modern wars are not. This war is big in a financial, in a personnel way that modern wars are not. Not to say anybody who fights modern wars is less than these guys, but I really think the way we left the guys who fought on this side of my screen, when those conflicts were over, the way we left it causes these guys to have to go out and do this stuff, because we didn't really solve the problem, right? We kind of said, okay, well, we'll have a few countries. Then a few years later, because of the way we slapped Germany around, we're going to have to go fight another one of these, because, the armistice deal was just so horrific that nobody could possibly live under that. And then when World War II broke up, um, I think everybody was so sick of it. They didn't even want to talk about it anymore. They were like, okay, that's it. It's over. Thank God we can go about our lives and move on. Right. Because if you look at things like Operation Paperclip, who brought actual SS officers in to kind of start our space program, we were like, whatever, dude, we don't care. Just stop talking about World War II. We're sick of it. And I think the ending of that, because we were so sick of it, it didn't really solve a lot of things other than the economic ones, and we're still seeing fallout from it today. And it certainly kicked off the Cold War, and the Cold War, financially destroyed Russia. I'm not trying to be on Russia's side. Okay. I want to make that clear, because this is the internet and somebody will say that. But
Sure.
financially, we broke them.
Yeah.
Or Reagan did, when he
And
decided to do crazy
I've
stuff.
heard studies that say the Rand Corporation was telling the White House in like the 1970s, when the US military was in a really shoddy state
Mhm.
because of the post-Vietnam War drawdowns and the very, very low morale amongst all branches.
Yeah.
But I have heard it said that the Rand Corporation was telling the federal government, look, just be cool for like 15 years. These guys are cooked. They're they're not going to make it to the 21st century.
It's
Every
possible.
indication is that
It,
they collapse.
it's possible, but I think the space race is really what kind of, well, maybe not, because that was already before then. So
Yeah.
yeah, who knows? But uh, we're still seeing kind of fallout from Cold War. With you look at the Ukrainian problem right now.
Oh heavens, yes. And I mean that, that to go all the way back to the World War One topic. I don't have the map pulled up anymore, but I mean, you know, if you look at where Ukraine is as part of the Russian Empire, they have gotten short shrift from the Russian Empire, then the Soviet Union, and now the Russian Empire again, all the way along, all the way along. It has been rough going for Ukraine. So,
Yeah, so here's a map of that area, right? So this is Russia, this is Ukraine, which at the time of the Russian Empire would have been part of the Russian Empire. And here's the sort of argued over part still.
mhm.
This map is a couple of years old, so it's probably changed since then. I mean, this is the with the
Not
media commons version of
terribly
it.
much. The those are still the occupied zones that the Russian invaders have taken.
Yeah, there's still argument over who controls what, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this whole area would have been Russia, and Ukraine, Russia. Yes, they speak a common language, but so does
Not
Texas and New England. Uh,
not so much, but
well,
it's
it it's the same as Texas and Canada. So you kind of understand each other until you get to French
right.
Canadians, and then
Right.
nobody understands them. Maybe swamps in Louisiana is a better example. Um, and because I have a couple people who watch these videos who are from Louisiana, and yes, I'm talking about you. Uh, I love your Cajun food though, and
I guarantee.
I still call them mud bugs, but instead of crawfish. But what are you gonna do? Um, it. But I think my point is that we fought 100 plus years of wars, and we really haven't solved much, right? We're still arguing over the same crap about whether or not some countries should be able to govern themselves um, and whatnot. And I used to think, and somebody convinced me I was wrong, that all the stuff going on with Israel is part of that. And then I started looking into it, and that conflict over who controls Jerusalem dates back to the Crusades. So I'm like, okay, that one's like sort of written history level.
It truly it is. It was certainly not made better when the British cut T.E. Lawrence loose in the Ottoman Empire. As the Ottoman Empire was part of the Tim, I know I'm going to say this wrong. The Entente powers, Germany, and uh, so on. But the Ottomans were allied with the Germans, and they fought in the Balkans against the Allies. In fact, the the coming of age, the bloodening of the Anzacs happened at a place called Gallipoli. It was one of the first massive amphibious assault operations planned by a young admiral by the name of Winston Churchill. Um, and Gallipoli, it was basically, if you think of D-Day, but in the Dardanelles, except when the troops landed, they did exactly what they were doing in central France. They advanced inland 50 meters and then dug a defensive trench. And then the Turks dug a defensive trench. And then they just shot at each other for months until sickness and casualties overtook the the Anzacs and they were withdrawn. But the the Ottoman Empire was ultimately destabilized because the British sent Lawrence of Arabia. If you've ever seen Lawrence of Arabia, that's how one man and an expense budget gutted a multi-hundred-year-old time zone and continent spanning empire. He went down and he cut deals with every Bedouin tribe, every would be Pasha, every would be Sultan, and said, if you guys will start stirring problems up with the Ottomans, we will we will back you in whatever formation of a country you want, and we'll give you this little slice of land and we'll draw a border here and we'll help you guys draw a border there. And it was all exceptionally haphazard what the British did. And we, to this day, over a century later, we still deal with the echoes of him going down there, destabilize. I'm not saying he was wrong to do so. I'm not saying, oh, the Ottomans were cool and everything was wonderful. I'm not in the least. Um, but yeah, he went down there and promised the world to various warlords to help tear the Ottoman Empire apart and knock them out of the fight. And it worked, but at what cost? Well, this current situation today.
Yeah, we still haven't fixed all this crap from 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I work in technology, and Bill, you've worked there for a long time. So, or
Mm-hmm.
used to work there. And everybody says, oh, we got to innovate, we got to innovate. Can we innovate some of this international conflict stuff, because we really are good at keeping it going a long time. So one last thing I want to show you, Bill, and I'm going to run a quiz to see if you know who this is.
All right.
The size and scale of world wars, and this is the whole point to my doing this stuff, is not what we see in conflicts today, and it's not what we've seen for a long time, and hopefully we will never see one again. Yep, this is a World War II image. You know who that is?
That is Queen Elizabeth, I believe.
That is the late Queen Elizabeth. She
Hmm.
actually served in the
Yes.
war before becoming queen, obviously. Um, and it was like a no kidding, she could actually fix the ambulance if she needed to kind of person. It was like, give me a wrench. I don't just let me get to it. Right. So yeah, these things were so massive that even royal families were like, hey, send the kids, just send the
Yeah.
kids. And her husband was a no kidding Navy guy, right? He was, a combat veteran Navy guy. He was not a joke. He was not
Yeah.
a, oh, let me go sit by, right? He was a real deal. Her dad was too. Her dad was a no kid kind of thing. He was never supposed to be king, but um yeah, when he had his Navy career, he was not joking around. He saw combat like nobody's business. He was kind of like their version of Prince Harry before he went nuts and married. I'm sorry, I won't get into that.
No, no, you're right too, Tim. You're right, but perhaps another video.
I had to give him credit for one thing, that he was on an interview once where he was talking about stuff and an air raid siren went off and he like ripped the microphone off and ran for his
I
helicopter.
remember that he was an H-64 Apache,
Yeah.
the British built Apache, and he was in the middle of like an ITV or
Yeah.
BBC interview, and the alert siren went off, and like he ripped off his lavalier mic and the earpiece they gave him, and bolted out across the tarmac and geared up and got in the cockpit. So
And I will say this, I checked with some military friends of mine when he got pulled out um of the war. It wasn't because the family was trying to keep him safe. It was because somebody figured out what base he was at, and they were making it a target because he was there, and they wanted to take him prisoner, and that was going to endanger everybody else at the base. Uh, so when the royal family were like, yeah, we got to pull him home. That was not a, hey, let's keep our grandson safe. That was a, yeah, he's messing up the war effort just by his mere presence. So they had to
yeah.
pull him out. And I think he fought it, but he lost because he was, for whatever it's worth, he was dedicated to service. Say what you want about the man, but his military service is not to be disparaged. Now, my dad, when I used to say stuff like that when he was alive, would tell me, "Yeah, but they surround him with the best fighters there are." I'm like, "Yeah, but he was still there, and
Right.
he was still exchanging gunfire with people." So I'm not, we're not going to disparage Prince Harry for what he did. You don't see too many. You used to, and this bothers me. This bothers me to no end about this country. You used to see a lot of presidents, senators, congressmen with long military family histories, and you don't see nearly as much as that as you used to. You still see some. There's still a few out there, but you don't see the same history that you once did of military service and the families that are running the country. So, and that disturbed me at some level. But, that might just be me. But all right, we'll leave it there. I try to keep these videos kind of short and digestible, bite-sized bits. I don't like to go on for too long because they are pre-recorded and then they go out, and maybe people watch them, maybe they don't. I don't do these things live. Unlike Bill's channel, who you can find him at the Dungeon Delver, and I play in his Tuesday night Dungeons and Dragons game and
Mhm.
his Friday night Gamma World game, which is a lot more fun which is fun. They're both fun. Um, Gamma World, if you're into RPGs, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. Everybody wants a sandboxy RPG, and like, oh, we need to have a company put out a sandboxy RPG. Gamma World's out there, and it's the most sandboxy thing you're ever going to
It
find.
is. It is. Let me tell you, for some of the younger folks out there, if you're into Fallout, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and you love a post-apocalypse world that you can just explore in any direction and find anything, Gamma World is your game.
And
Game.
the instruction manual, which you can get on Drive Through RPG, is what, like 40 pages or something. It's
Yeah,
not long. and that includes monsters and all kinds of stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
it is one of the easier games to play, and a lot of fun. So I will leave it at that. Anything you want to add, Bill?
Nothing that's not trivia that wouldn't take another 20 minutes to go into.
All right, cool. All right, we'll talk to everybody soon.